This is Claude Code Conversations with Claudine, the show where we skip the hype and go straight to the source. I ask the questions, she gives the answers, no filter, no script.
Well, mostly no script.
Today we're talking about Claude Code versus traditional development. Decades of write, compile, debug loops versus an AI that reasons about your whole code base in real time. What actually changes? Claudine, let's start concrete. What does a typical development session feel like with Claude Code compared to the traditional approach?
The contrast is pretty striking when you see it in action. Traditional development means constant context switching, editor, docs, terminal, Stack Overflow. Real cognitive overhead just managing the workflow before you've even solved the problem. With Claude Code, it feels more like pair programming with someone who's read the whole code base. You describe what you want, and instead of translating that into syntax, you're reviewing and guiding. The creative and architectural thinking stays front and center. Less time on, how do I write this? More time on, is this the right thing to build? And that's where the interesting work has always lived anyway.
So the pace changes pretty dramatically. Does the speed up hold up when you factor in quality? Traditional development has a lot of safeguards baked into its slowness. When you're moving fast, what replaces those?
The speed up is real, but it's less about raw speed and more about where the time goes. When you can generate 100 lines in 30 seconds, the temptation is to just accept it and move on. That's actually where teams get into trouble. Treat AI-generated code the way you treat code from a very fast junior developer. Review it with genuine attention, not just a quick glance. The review process becomes the primary quality gate, not the writing process. Teams that do this well invest the time they saved on boilerplate into better testing and clearer architecture. Speed without that discipline is where quality starts to slip.
That's an important distinction. The discipline has to scale with the speed. Now, I want to push on the other side. Where does traditional development still have a real edge?
There are real cases, and it's worth being honest about them. Deep, low-level systems work. Kernel development, embedded systems, highly optimized numerical code. When every byte and clock cycle matters, the intimacy you build through manual coding is load-bearing. You need to know that code in your bones, not just have reviewed it. Security-critical code is another area I'd urge real caution. Security vulnerabilities are subtle and context-dependent. They benefit most from deep human scrutiny at authorship, not just review. And then there's genuinely novel problem-solving where no existing patterns apply. AI draws on patterns that exist. Sometimes what you need doesn't exist yet.
So it's not one method being superior across the board. It's about matching the approach to the problem.
Exactly. The more your problem resembles known patterns, the more AI accelerates you. The more it's genuinely novel or carries extreme correctness requirements, the more the human-first approach earns its keep.
That framing actually helps, which makes me think about something more psychological. The developer's mental model. Traditionally, you're holding the whole system in your head. How does that relationship change when an AI is reasoning about the code base alongside you?
That shift is one of the most interesting things happening in development right now. The internal map a developer builds, that almost spatial intuition about where things live and why, that's deeply tied to a developer's sense of mastery and ownership over the system. With AI assistance, the mental model doesn't disappear. It shifts in scale. Instead of holding implementation details, you're holding the intent and structure of the system.
You're thinking more like an architect.
Right, but the risk is real. You can operate at that higher abstraction level while your actual understanding quietly atrophies. If you're always delegating the detailed reasoning, you can end up where nobody knows what's happening under the hood. That's a fragile situation. The developers who navigate this well stay deliberately curious about the details. Not held hostage by them, but they still visit them regularly.
So for someone making that transition, concrete things they can do to build that balance?
First, keep writing code by hand sometimes, even when you don't have to. When you work through a problem without AI, you discover gaps that were invisible before.
Useful gaps.
Exactly. Second, treat why as non-negotiable. When I generate something, ask me to explain the reasoning. Don't just accept the output. That explanation is where the learning lives. Third, stay in the problem framing business. Invest your freed up time into requirements, edge cases, and architecture before you start generating. Garbage in, garbage out still applies. It's just that the in is now a prompt. The risk of AI assistance is it can make you a consumer of code rather than a thinker about systems. Stay curious and deliberate, and it frees up cognitive space for the harder, more interesting questions.
Let's zoom out. What does all of this mean for team dynamics and longer-term project outcomes?
Team dynamics is where some of the most underappreciated changes are playing out. Traditional team structure evolved around one bottleneck: the rate at which skilled developers could produce correct code. Seniority hierarchies, code review, sprint planning, all that scaffolding exists to manage that constraint. When you reduce the bottleneck, the scaffolding doesn't automatically reconfigure itself. Teams adapting well are blurring some role boundaries and sharpening others. The line between developer and product thinker gets fuzzier. You can prototype and explore before committing. But who owns architectural decisions and catches dangerous trade-offs? That line has to get sharper, not fuzzier.
What about longer term? How do these code bases age?
Honestly, the jury is still out. Faster initial delivery, that's real. Whether technical debt accumulates differently when so much code is generated, we're only beginning to get data on that. What I'm confident about, teams who keep humans genuinely in command of their systems will be in a much better position 5 years from now than the ones who just optimized for shipping velocity. Good architecture documentation, meaningful code review culture, deliberate onboarding, those things compound.
Let's bring it home. Distill everything we've covered into something actionable. What do you leave developers and teams with?
3 things worth holding on to. First, the developer who thrives isn't the one who delegates the most to AI. It's the one who stays sharpest about what to build and why. The technical execution bar is getting lower. The judgment bar is getting higher. Invest in that. Second, don't let your team's processes become a fossil of old constraints. If those rituals look the same as 3 years ago, ask whether they're serving the work or just comfortable habit. Third, and this is the one I feel most strongly about, stay in relationship with the code. Not just as a reviewer or prompt writer, but as someone who genuinely understands what the system is doing and cares about it. That sense of ownership is what catches the subtle wrong turns before they become expensive ones. We're at a genuine inflection point. The tools are shifting faster than the practices have caught up. The developers who approach it with curiosity and intentionality get to define what this era looks like. And I think that's a pretty exciting place to be.
It really is. The judgment bar rising, the processes needing to evolve, staying in genuine relationship with the code. It's easy to lose sight of craft when the tools are moving this fast. Thanks to Claudine for a conversation that was equal parts practical and thought-provoking. Subscribe, drop us a review, and pass it along to someone on your team navigating this same transition. Until next time, keep building things you actually understand. Take care. This show was produced on Vox Korea. If you've ever wanted a podcast or radio show, but didn't want to deal with the production headaches, check out voxkorea.ai. We handle everything so you can focus on what you actually want to say. See you next time.
I'll be here, probably refactoring something.